If you've seen my videos, you know there is a bit of history and stories that I do tell in between my travels, and that's why I'm actually here in the Olympic village in Munich, because of what happened during the 1972 Olympics. And here is the story. The Munich Olympics opened on August 26, 1972 with 195 events and 7,173 athletes representing 121 countries. Olympics being hosted on the German soil for the first time after 1936 summer, when this guy was in charge. Hitler saw the 1936 games as an opportunity to promote his government and ideals of racial supremacy and anti-Semitism. The official Nazi party used media to propagate anti-Semitism and ban Jews from participating in the Olympics. The West German government was eager to show the optimistic and democratic Germany to the world. The 1972 Olympics was prestigious and it was absolutely important that it goes trouble-free. But that was not the case. 8 Palestinian militants affiliated with Black September scaled the fence surrounding the Olympic village in Munich. Disguised as athletes and using stolen keys, they forced their way into the quarters of the Israeli Olympic team, 31 Koloniestrasse. As they attempted to enter apartment 1, they were confronted by Josef Gutfreund, a wrestling referee, and Moshe Weinberg, a wrestling coach. Weinberg was shot while fighting with the attackers, who forced him at gunpoint to lead them to the rooms of the remaining Israeli coaches and athletes. The Israeli athletes were accommodated in 3 apartments. In apartment 3, the terrorists gathered more hostages and forced them back to apartment 1. Weinberg had nearly gained control of a terrorist gun when he was shot and killed. Charles Ladonnais, a race walker, survived the attack after escaping from apartment 2 and running to the parking lot. Joseph Romano, a weightlifter, also made an attempt to disarm one of the terrorists. Romano was killed and his mutilated body was left on the floor of apartment 1 as a warning to the others. 2 Israelis lay already dead in the Olympic village and 9 others were being held hostage. But who were these people and what did they want? After Jordan lost control of the West Bank to Israel in 1967, Palestinian fighters known as Fada'in moved their bases to Jordan and stepped up their attacks on Israel and Israeli-occupied territories. Many Palestinian refugees fled from Israel-occupied territories to Jordan. The joint Jordanian-Palestinian victory against Israel during the 1968 Battle of Karameh led to an upsurge in Arab support for the Fada'in in Jordan, and by the beginning of 1970, groups within the PLO had begun openly calling for the overthrow of the Jordanian monarchy. The King of Jordan was not pleased with that. The Jordanian military attacked in January 1971, and the Fada'in were driven out of the cities, one by one, until 2,000 Fada'in surrendered after being surrounded on 17 July, marking the end of the conflict. The Black September organization was formed after the conflict to carry out reprisals against the Jordanian authorities. And the organization's first noted attack was the assassination of the Jordanian Prime Minister Wasif Tali in 1971, who had commanded the parts of the operation which expelled Fedayeen from Jordan. The organization then shifted to attacking Israeli targets. Charles Ladonnais, the athlete who escaped, was a survivor of the Belsen-Bergen concentration camp and was the first person to spread the alert. It was the first time Olympics was televised live, so the whole world was watching, including the terrorists. The gunmen were left with 9 hostages. The hostage takers threw the body of Weinberg out of the front door of the residence to demonstrate their resolve. The hostage situation presented an extremely difficult political solution for the Germans because the hostages were Jewish and due to the history of what happened just 30 years ago. At 7:40 am, the negotiations began and the hostage takers demanded the release of 234 Palestinians and non-Arabs jailed in Israel, along with 2 West German insurgents, Andreas Baader and Ulrike Meinhof, who were jailed in Germany. And they set the deadline to noon. At one point during the crisis, the negotiators demanded direct contact with the hostages to make sure that the Israelis were still alive. Fencing coach Andres Spitzer, who spoke fluent German, and shooting coach Gerhard Schor, the senior member of the Israeli delegation, had a brief conversation with the West German officials while standing at the second floor window of the sieged building, with 2 kidnappers holding guns on them. The mayor of the Olympic village were briefly allowed into the apartments to speak with the hostages. Reports say that the Germans offered the Palestinians an unlimited amount of money for the release of the athletes. However, the kidnappers refused the offer. Their reply was, "Money means nothing to us. Our lives mean nothing to us." After the shooting, the Palestinians allowed an ambulance to drive to pick up one of the wounded Israelis. but the ambulance's driver retreated as sudden shooting started between the Palestinians and the police. Nearly 3,000 police officers were stationed in and around the Olympic Village, while snipers surrounded the building. A squad of 38 West German police officers were dispatched to the Olympic Village. They were dressed in Olympic sweatsuits. Some also were wearing Stahlhelme or steel helmets and carrying Walther MP submachine guns. Their plan was to crawl down from the ventilation shafts and kill the Palestinians. The police took up positions awaiting the code word Sunshine, which upon hearing, they were going to begin the assault. Camera crews filmed the actions of the officers and broadcasted the images live on television. Thus, the Palestinians were able to watch the police prepare to attack. Footage shows one of the kidnappers peering from the balcony door while one of the police officers just stood on the roof 6 meters away. In the end, after threatening to kill 2 of the hostages, the police retreated from the premises. The Munich Olympic organizers have spent less than $2 million on security, and most of the security personnel are unarmed and inexperienced. There were a lot of controversial reports that the German officials had an intelligence report that there was going to be an attack, but they did not act on it. The negotiators apparently were able to convince the hostage takers that their demands were being met and bought more time. Either way, it showed that Germany was not ready to handle such situations. 6 p.m. Munich time, the Palestinians issued a new dictate demanding transportation to Cairo using a private jet. A van transported the hostages and the Palestinians to the helicopter landings. The helicopters just landed and 4 pilots and 6 of the kidnappers emerged, while 4 of the Black September members held the pilots at gunpoint, breaking an earlier promise that they would not take any German hostages. The leader Issa walked over to inspect the jet, only to find it empty. Realizing they had been lured into a trap, they sprinted back to the helicopters. As they ran past the control tower, Sniper 3 took one last opportunity to eliminate Issa, which would then leave the group leaderless. However, due to the poor lighting, he struggled to see the target and missed, hitting Tony in the thigh instead. In the ensuing chaos, Ahmed Chikhtar and Afif Ahmed Hamid, the 2 kidnappers holding the helicopter pilots, were killed while the remaining gunmen, some possibly already wounded, scrambled to safety. The helicopter pilots fled. The hostages tied up inside the craft unfortunately could not escape. At 11 p.m., the West German authorities gave the order for snipers positioned nearby to open fire. A West German police officer in the control of tower, Anton Fliegerbauer, was killed by the gunfire, returning fire from behind and beneath the helicopters out of the sniper's line of sight, shooting out many of the airport's lights. One of the Palestinians, likely Issa, turned on the hostages in the eastern helicopter and opened fire at them with a Kalashnikov assault rifle from point-blank range. 3 hostages were killed instantly. The attackers then pulled the pin of a hand grenade and tossed it into the cockpit. The explosion destroyed the helicopter and incinerated the bound Israelis inside. Issa then dashed across the tarmac and began firing at the police, who killed him in the return fire. Khalid Jawad, another hostage taker, attempted to escape but was taken down by one of the snipers. 3 of the remaining hostage takers lay on the ground and were taken by the police. Yusuf Natsal, nicknamed Tony, had escaped but was quickly caught by the police dogs after 40 minutes in the airbase parking lot, and he was shot dead after a brief gunfight. But what happened to these 3 Palestinians who were captured? On 29 October 1972, Lufthansa Flight 615 was hijacked by the members of the Black September sympathizers and aimed at the liberation of the 3 surviving Palestinians of the Munich massacre from the West German prison. The West German officials agreed on releasing the 3 prisoners who were responsible for the Munich massacre. They were handed over at Zagreb airport, and the hijacked aircraft was flown to Tripoli. The liberated Munich attackers were offered asylum by Muammar Gaddafi, the leader of Libya. 2 of the 3 attackers were killed by the Israeli Secret Service Mossad in the Operation Wrath of God. The 3rd surviving gunman, Jamal al-Qashe, was found to be alive till 1999, mostly hiding in Syria or North Africa, and was never punished or caught. The whole tragic massacre and chaos happened right there in those buildings which used to host the Olympic athletes in 1972.